If you're not a numbers person, business is numbers. It is a huge, huge part of the overall business. This is the formula that all lead providers do not want you to learn. And the reason they don't want you to learn it is because after you know this formula, you're going to be able to make intelligent decisions to find the best possible lead source for your business. Now, I use this every single time I go to spend money now because I've had so many painful experiences in the past, as I'm sure you might have as well. When you invest in a lead source for your team and it doesn't quite work out, I've done this where had I done this in the past, I would have not invested massive amounts of money every single month into a lead source that was just never going to be profitable from the beginning. So in this episode, I'm going to break down the most important formulas you're going to need to know when it comes to investing in leads. This is going to be your customer acquisition cost. And this is one of the biggest things you're going to want to know is that it's not always a lead conversion problem. Sometimes it's just a math problem. Now, this podcast is specifically for team leaders and broker owners. I'm sharing my experience, the good and the bad of starting my company and growing my company, Onyx Homes, from start to finish. Now, if you want the closest possible look at how we're doing this, you can go to onyxhomes.com/school. Link is in the description or wherever. That's the closest possible look. Now, let's dive in. Also, for the record here, if you're watching this or listening to this rather on audio only, this particular episode, I'm going to have a lot of visuals. So you might want to hop over to YouTube and subscribe to the channel there as well too. But if you're on YouTube already, let's go ahead and dive in, and I'm going to share my screen on my iPad. So let's talk about a couple different definitions that are going to be really important. So the first one is going to be CPL, right? These are acronyms. This is your cost per lead. Right, this is a very easy, very basic one. The second thing that I'm going to talk about, if you hear me say CVR, that just stands for conversion rate. And this is rather simple, but I didn't know this when I was starting my team. And if I would have saved a bunch of money, which I have several stories for you as well. And this is one that's probably new for most people is CAC, which is customer acquisition cost. This is a newer one for me. What is the cost that it actually acquires you to do a deal, right? So those are our definitions. Let's go ahead and now let's go to the formula. So the formula is very simple. You have your cost per lead divided by your conversion rate. And this is going to give you your customer acquisition cost. All right, let me give a very real life example. So I was just talking with the team leader the other day, and this person made the same mistake that I did back 3 years ago that almost personally bankrupted me. So back in 2021, we moved from spending $25,000 per month on Zillow, and I can walk through this math with that. But we went from $25,000 per month and we got onboarded onto the Flex program. So we had this $25,000 a month. I'm going to share with you two different examples. I'm going to draw a line down the middle here. I'm going to write what we should have done. And I think my business would be massively larger if I had done this. And then I'm going to explain. So that's the second thing that I'll talk about. The first thing that I'm going to talk about is what we actually did. All right, so here's the formula, and here's the story really quick. So this is a real estate team leader. These are very real numbers. We just walked through everything, and this is nothing against Realtor.com, but this is very real numbers. And this is an agent that is investing $45,000 per month into this source, signed contract. So the cost per lead, CPL, is roughly $250. The conversion rate is about 3%. Okay, so now we can figure out what the cost per lead, and this person has been spending not nearly this much money, but this team leader has been spending this much money for the last year. So we actually have real stats on this. Now, if you're investing in a lead source, these are the two numbers you want to make sure you understand. The only pro tip you're going to want to know here is, let me write this down. The pro tip here is conversion on what timeline? Because if I tell you you can convert leads at 10% over 10 years, well, that doesn't really help you out very much. certainly not for right now. So that's one pro tip that I'll leave as well. So I'm going to erase this just to give myself a little bit more room. But I would normally look at your conversion rate over a 1-year basis. You should probably also know what it is over 6 months. But if you're anything like I was, you're not very good at tracking your numbers, and we want to get better at that. So let's use this formula. So we have a $250 cost per lead divided by 3%, which is 0.03. If you're not good with math like most salespeople aren't, I'm going to pull out my calculator right now. And I'm going to take the $250 cost per lead divided by 3%, which is 0.03. So this is going to cost $8,333 cost to acquire a customer. This is your customer acquisition cost, or your CAC. Now, what does this actually tell us? Let me add a page in here to elaborate on this. So this particular agent, let's say it's going to cost them $8,300, just round it off, in order to do a deal. So in this very real example, their average commission amount is about $15,000. And it's going to cost them $8,300 in marketing, right? In spend. But this person's running a team. So this leaves, I need to get my calculator back out. So this leaves 66.66. Great number. That leaves $6,666 left. And again, if you're listening to this audio only trying to stay along, highly recommend writing it out. But the formula is really what you need to understand here. So that leaves $6,666 after ad spend. Well, the problem is this team leader has their agent split 50%. So 50% of 7,500, of 15,000 is 7,500. And if you're saying, Christian, there's a negative number here. Yes, there is. There is a negative number here. So if you want me to write this out correctly, what we're doing here is we have $15,000 in revenue. We have minus $7,500 in split, which is a cost of goods sold, which leaves us with $7,500 in gross profit. And if you're not looking at this on an actual deal basis, you might just see that, hey, we did a deal, we got $7,500, we made $7,500, that's fantastic. And if you don't know what your customer acquisition cost, you're not realizing that you spent $8,333 on, let's just say, marketing or customer acquisition cost. So from $7,500, you're actually losing $833 per deal. And you're spending $50,000 per month to do this. So this is a negative return on investment after your agent's paid. Frankly, this doesn't even account for broker split, transaction fees, transaction coordinators, your marketing person's time. Your customer acquisition cost typically would include all of those things. However, in this example, just to make it easy, I'm not going to include any of that. Okay, so this is a very real life story, and I was talking to this agent. Shout out, you know who you are. And if we do not massively change something in this person's business, they're going to lose their ass on this $45,000 a month spend. So let's move into, I did the same thing. I wasn't spending quite that much. I was spending about $25,000 a month, but it nearly bankrupted us because the cash flow, the numbers didn't make sense in the first place, and you're going to be shelling out $50,000, $25,000, whatever the number is, for probably 6 months, 3 months at least, before you see any money back. And you're going to be losing money when you finally get it back. So anyway, here I'm going to talk about what I should have done, and then I will talk. Well, here's what I did. I did exactly. So I spent money also on Realtor.com, ironically, and I was spending $25K per month. And the numbers were never going to make sense. The math was bad. And that's it. That's the only two ways about it. There are no two other ways about it. The math never would have made sense in the first place. So I lost $75,000 because thank God they let me out of the contract. If they wouldn't have let me out of the contract and I would have had to have lost another 75,000 in the next 3 months, I would have been screwed. So here's what I should have done. I should have gone and said, what am I already doing that is working? If I had done this, my team would be larger now, guaranteed. But I didn't. What I did instead was I went and spent Realtor.com and almost went bankrupt. But if I would have known what I know now, I would have said, "Hey Christian, what are you already doing that's working? And then can we do more of that?" So I would have looked and said, "Okay, cool. So we are doing." Let's go to a different color here. Let's go to gold. So we were doing Google pay-per-click, and we were spending like $8K a month, and we were getting a 1% conversion rate on a 25, so CVR, 1% CVR and a $25 CPL. And this was not nearly as sexy because the leads are harder to convert, right? 1% conversion rate versus, 5 or 6% conversion rate on Realtor.com. Let's just use the 5 that we talked about as an example, or the 3 rather as an example before. So let me do this. Let me even say our conversion rate is half of 1%, so 0.5% conversion rate. And we were spending about $8,000 a month. So let's do the customer acquisition cost. What is the CAC? So 25 cost per lead divided by 0.005, because we're doing half of 1% to be very conservative. So 25 divided by 0.005. So this is a customer acquisition cost of $5,000 versus the $8,300 for Realtor.com that was not profitable. And if I would have spent more money on this, our customer acquisition, or our cost per lead likely would have gone down. But I didn't do that. So if I would have done this, this customer acquisition cost is actually profitable. Let's run the math really quick. I'm going to switch colors to black here so we can read a little bit easier. So and this was for my average numbers, right? So our average price points, $1 million, and let's just say our average commission was 2.25. So our average revenue was $22,500, and this is revenue minus $11,250 for the split to the agent at 50%, leaves us with $11,250, and that is gross profit minus your $5,000 in customer acquisition costs. That leaves us with at least a profit. Now, it's not a huge profit, but it is a profit. It would leave us with, I could have done this math without a calculator, $6,250 in, I don't want to call this net profit, but let's just call it for argument's sake. That's profit. Okay, so this is what would have happened. Knowing what I know now, this is half of what I would have done. Now, with $25,000 a month, let's also figure this out. So if I was spending 25 plus 8 is 32. So I would have been spending $32,000 per month divided by a $25 cost per lead. That would have got me, so 32,000 divided by 25 would have got me 1,280 leads per month. Okay, now if I was converting these at half of 1%, so times 0.005, half of 1%, which is terrible for the record, I would have been doing 6.4 deals per month. That is times 12. That alone is 76 deals from this exact lead source. This would have been doing, if you are familiar with any of my content at all, this framework that I did not know at that time, but I know now. More is greater than better is greater than new. So I went to new instead of doing more of what was already working. If you have something that's working, can you do 10 times more of it and just do it because you don't know? New is, let me do this. New is risky. It just is. You don't know if it's going to work. You might think it's going to work. You might hope that it's going to work, but you don't know that it's going to work. It's new. How could you? But you can pretty much guarantee that if you do more of what you're already doing, that it is going to work. Now, let me go into more detail of what we actually do now. So we're on Zillow Flex, and we've learned that Zillow actually knows what they're doing. However you feel about Zillow is fine. We love our partnership with Zillow, frankly. Do we love everything about it? Of course not. But they charge a 40% referral fee when they generate leads. And we just did this as well, too, as we added this on anything that we generate. So let's do this math again. So I'm just going to round this off. I'm going to actually lower the number here. But let's take $20,000 times, what did we say? 70 times a 40% referral fee, right? So that would be $8,000. This is the 40% marketing fee is what we call it. So in my team, we have on anything we generate, we have a 40% marketing fee, unless there's already a referral fee, right? So like on a Zillow lead, we don't have that. So that leaves us with, $12,000 in a GCI. Now the agents make 50% of that, right? So then we pay $6,000 in split because they make 50% of adjusted gross. That leaves us with $6,000 in gross profit. But then we add back in that marketing fee. So our real gross profit is, what is this, 14,000? So we spent if you remember from the numbers above, I'm going to use a different color here. So we spent $5,000 in order to make 14,000. Now this is almost a 3x ROI. So this is if I could do math, 14,000 divided by 5,000 is a 2.8x ROI. So for every dollar that I put in, I would get $2.8 back. And it scales like crazy. Because if we would have spent $32,000 a month times a 2.8 ROI, we would be making 89, let's just say $90,000 in not profit, but like in profit extra per month for this lead source instead of going bankrupt. Now, the other thing that would have happened is, where was this number of leads? 1,280 leads per month. 1,280 times, this was 3 years ago, 1,280 times 36 months, I would have an additional 46,000 leads in my database. Had I just did more of what already worked, I would have made way more money. I would have had way more leads. We would have done way more deals, would have actually made money. And cherry on the top, I would have way more leads in my database. So this is something that I highly, I'm not telling you to just go spend money on Realtor.com or maybe not to spend money on Realtor.com and to spend money on Google pay-per-click instead. My point is to do the math. And do not go based on your gut feeling, because your gut, if you don't do this type of math, like it should be a very quick back of napkin. What is the cost per lead? What is the conversion rate? And if you don't know either of those numbers, do not invest at all if you're buying leads from somebody. Now, if you're doing your own in-house advertising, you're not going to know exactly what the numbers are, but you're going to have a way better idea. You can just start asking people as well what their numbers are. So we run in-house advertising as well too, and we're working on a new campaign. So our kind of projections here, we're getting about a $30 cost per lead. And I can pretty much guarantee, and this is way too early in the numbers to be able to tell you. I'd love to come back. I'll do an episode in a year from now or so, and I'll tell you how this actually worked out. But let's just say we have 0.5% conversion rate. And the math is what I just talked about. So if I'm getting $30 cost per lead divided by 0.005, that number is going to be slightly higher than $5,000. And I am very adamant that we're going to be able to convert these leads way higher than 0.5%. I'm very, very confident about that. So this would be a $6,000 customer acquisition cost. And I just broke down the numbers that this would be, I don't know, a 2.5x ROI. So if I spent 100K, that turns into 250 in profit. And then if I take the 250 and reinvest, 250 turns into a lot more, right? You get the point. So this is what I'm looking for in my business right now. Now it takes math. It also takes time, and it might take patience. Let me share a quick, takeaway from this is I have for the last 2.5 years, probably even scarred might be the right way to say this, but I've been really, really hesitant to buy leads from anywhere. Obviously, we have our referral partners that refer us leads, and obviously, if there's no cost there, there's no real risk. But this last year, we've 3x'd our marketing budget in the last, 9 months. And that has been the first time in 3 years, honestly, where we're starting to spend a lot of money. And we're starting to see this traction. And now that we kind of know our numbers, or I should say we really know our numbers, we're getting really, really excited about this. Now, let me paint a totally different picture because you're a team leader, you're watching this, that's what this podcast is for. Now, everything we've talked about thus far is relevant for a solo agent as well, too. So if you're watching this and you're thinking, God, I should probably learn how to do this math, this is what I'm making this content for. However, if you're a team leader, we also have this for our recruiting. So the number one lead source for everybody that runs a real business, a real team, is Indeed for recruiting. Everybody that I've talked to. So you should know your numbers on this. Now, my numbers have changed over time. However, in what we're seeing right now is about let's just use rounder numbers. Let's just say a $50 cost per lead. This is a application applied to our Indeed posting. And let me just pull up the actual real number while I'm talking to you, and I can give you the conversion rate. So historically, it changes, right? And it depends on the type of job posting you have. It depends on a lot of different things. But if I look at right now, so this quarter, we are currently averaging 44 recruiting leads per week, and we're averaging 1.6 onboarded agents per week. So that means we have 44 divided by 1.6 divided by 44. So that means we're converting 3.5% of the leads to an onboarded agent. Okay, so our CVR is 3.6% CVR. All right, so now I know what it cost me to acquire an agent, at least based on Indeed's numbers. So I would take CPL divided by my conversion rate, and this is going to equal, so 50 divided by 0.036. So it's costing me $1,389 in order to acquire an onboarded agent. Now, the reason I bring this up is my cost per lead. I literally just last week did this. My cost per lead from Indeed went from $7 all the way up to $50 to $60, and it really hasn't stopped changing. So between $50 and $60 cost per lead. So that is a 10x almost, not quite, 8x increase in the cost per lead. However, our conversion rate has actually doubled as well. So the customer acquisition cost hasn't really changed very much. And all I had to do, instead of panicking and shutting off my Indeed, which would stop my recruiting flow, all I did was a math equation. And I just literally just did it as I'm pulling this up. We're averaging 44 leads a week, and we're averaging 1.6 onboarded agents per week. So I can go in and say, okay, that's a 3.6% conversion rate, and it's a $50 cost per lead. So I know exactly what it cost me to acquire an agent. Is it higher than it used to be? Yeah, but not really. It's like $150 higher than it used to be. Even though my cost per lead went up by 8 times, my conversion rate went up. I suppose that means we're converting at a higher rate, so there's higher quality candidates, would be my assumption. That's a guess, and I could talk to my office administrator who's taking all the recruiting calls, and he's probably talking to more qualified people with fewer of them. This is why it's really important. I could have very easily pulled the plug on my Indeed ads last quarter. So it would have been 5 months ago. I could have pulled the plug on this, and I would have lost an average of 1 agent per week over the last 5 months. So that's probably 20 weeks, let's say. So I would have lost 30 agents if I didn't know how to do math, and I just panicked and took my Indeed job posting down, if I just took it down. And frankly, I did this last year. I've talked about this in a previous episode where I lowered our Indeed ad spend and did not look at the math early enough to realize how much opportunity we had missed in the marketplace last year. And we probably lost opportunity cost, lost about 20 agents that we should have probably recruited that went somewhere else instead of us. So anyway, this math equation is something you're going to use for absolutely everything. Now, if you're asking Christian on the recruiting numbers, we've talked about this on previous episodes, and since I'm here talking about it, I might as well. So we talk about an agent is probably going to bring you about $30,000 in gross profit per year. Your business model honestly doesn't really matter that much. So if you have $30,000 in gross profit that you get from, did I just spell profit wrong? Yikes. $30,000 in gross profit in ratio to your $1,389 cost per acquisition, your customer acquisition cost. So that means you're making $30,000 for every $1,389 that you spend. That is a 21.6x ROI for us. So every time I look to lower my overall recruiting budget, I then look at this number, and I want to stab myself in the eyeballs for every time that I chose to lower our recruiting efforts. And it's because of a very, very simple math equation that agents, another Cheplack famous quote, agents move the money. Yes, they need leads. Yes, they need support. Yes, they need all the things, but agents move the money. So if I can make the best possible place for agents to work, and I can spend $1 and make $21.50 back, I'm going to do that all day long forever. Now, this is just something where when a lot of the times we just don't slow down to do the math to really figure out, like, is this what we should be doing? Should I stop running my Indeed job posting? No, I shouldn't. Let me give you maybe you should find a second source, right? So we are running a Meta campaign. Same example, same everything. Our cost per lead on Meta is $40. So it's lower cost per lead. And our conversion rate is, and it's probably too early to tell the real conversion rate here. Let me see if I can pull it really, really quick. I'm just going to try to get a rough guesstimate. All right, so as I'm pulling this up, I'm just trying to get a really rough guesstimate here, but I believe it's closer to 5%. So I am going to do the math for you. All right, so we have, a 5% conversion rate. So slightly better conversion than what we're seeing on Indeed, and the cost per lead is a little bit lower. So if we do this math equation and we take $40 divided by 0.05, I can see that my customer acquisition cost on Meta, yes, Facebook and Instagram, is $800. Now, the other question is, so should I stop doing Indeed and only do Meta? Well, maybe we should start migrating our budget from Indeed to Meta, because we're spending about 8x more on Indeed than we are in Meta. So we're going to start to move that budget over time and keep an eye on both customer acquisition costs. That's number one. Number two is, which brings a better agent? Right? Which one is actually a better source? And what I mean by that is, if you know anything about online lead generation, you know that a Zillow lead or a Realtor.com lead is overall a better lead than a Google pay-per-click lead. It is easier. They are also going to have agents don't have an average price point necessarily, but an agent that comes from Indeed is, I can already tell you this, not as successful or does not sell as much as an agent that comes through us from Meta. Is not as successful an agent that is referred to us from another agent on our team. So the different source is going to determine how successful they are. I used that $30,000 gross profit mark as a benchmark across everything. However, it's going to be different depending on the different source. So that's, again, this whole entire podcast is for you to know your numbers a little bit better. I don't want to go too much more in depth from this, because this is how really I feel very adamantly that you should be running most of your business this way. If you're not a numbers person, business is numbers. It is a huge part of the overall business. So bring your lead flow, have the conversations, ask questions. And if you have specific questions on this, here is a direct call to action. You can go into the school community. You can go to onyxhomes.com/school. It's with a K. Link and the thing is everywhere. Go in there and ask the question in the community page and just say, hey, I'm spending this much money. This is my conversion rate. Help me out with the formula if you're not a math person. I will personally do an audit on your thing on there as well too. You just got to mention me in the comments so I can, or mention me on the post so that I can see that you did that. So if you want the closest possible look of me building my company, that is what you're going to see inside of the community. So I hope you really liked this video. If you did, like and comment, but make sure you send it to a friend that you feel like needs this information in their business. So I made another video I think you might also want to check out. Go ahead and click the link, and I'll see you in the next one.